Are you ready to uncover the dramatic events that reshaped Afghanistan forever? Afghanistan in the 1970s was a land of stark beauty and deep contradictions. Towering mountains sliced through the rugged landscape, their snow-capped peaks mirrored in ancient lakes. In the bustling bazaars of Kabul, the air hummed with the scent of spices and the melodic cries of merchants. The winds of modernization were blowing across the Hindu Kush, carrying the promise of progress and unrest. Afghanistan was a monarchy, ruled by King Zahir Shah. A young generation educated in the West yearned for a more modern society. In this volatile landscape stood Mohammed Daoud Khan, a man of ambition and determination. With military support, he launched a bloodless coup, proclaiming himself president of the Republic of Afghanistan. Mohammed Daoud Khan was a study in contrasts. He was a man of great personal charm and charisma, known for his piercing gaze and commanding presence. He could be a captivating conversationalist, fluent in several languages, and well-versed in history and politics. Yet, beneath this veneer of sophistication, lurked a ruthless and ambitious autocrat. Daoud was a staunch nationalist, determined to modernize Afghanistan and secure its place on the world stage. His vision for Afghanistan was one of rapid modernization and economic development. He implemented ambitious infrastructure projects, building roads, dams, and schools. He sought to expand Afghanistan's industrial base and reduce its dependence on foreign aid. In a country where tribal loyalties often trumped national identity, Daoud sought to forge a strong central government and impose his will on the fractious nation. However, Daoud's methods were often as heavy-handed as his ambitions were grand. He brooked no opposition and ruthlessly crushed any dissent. Political opponents were jailed or exiled, and the press was tightly controlled. His regime, while ostensibly Republican, became increasingly authoritarian, marked by paranoia and a tightening grip on power. As Daoud consolidated his power, a new threat to his rule was emerging from the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, or PDPA. Founded in 1965, the PDPA was a communist party, inspired by Marx and Lenin. The PDPA found fertile ground among Afghanistan's urban intellectuals, students, and disaffected youth. These young idealists, disillusioned by Daoud's authoritarianism, flocked to the PDPA's banner. The PDPA was split into two factions, the Khalq and the Parcham. Despite their differences, both factions aimed to overthrow Daoud's regime and establish a socialist state. The relationship between Daoud and the PDPA was complex and fraught with tension. Initially, Daoud saw the PDPA as a potential ally in his quest to modernize Afghanistan. However, as the PDPA grew in strength, Daoud became increasingly wary of its communist ideology. He moved to suppress the party, arresting its leaders and driving its activities underground. The Cold War cast a long shadow over Afghanistan. The Soviet Union saw Afghanistan as a strategic prize, a gateway to the Indian Ocean. The United States viewed Afghanistan as a crucial buffer state against communist encroachment. Both superpowers provided aid to the Afghan government, seeking to advance their own interests. The Soviet Union cultivated close ties with Daoud Khan's regime. Soviet advisors and technicians provided training and equipment to the Afghan armed forces. Soviet aid flowed into the country, funding infrastructure projects. As Daoud's rule became repressive, discontent grew among the Afghan populace. The PDPA continued to agitate against the regime, calling for revolution. The stage was set for a violent confrontation. The simmering tensions in Afghanistan finally boiled over on April 27, 1978. The assassination of Mir Akbar Khyber, a prominent PDPA member, ignited the powder keg. The party called for a day of mourning, which morphed into a massive anti-government demonstration. Daoud Khan ordered the arrest of PDPA leaders, hoping to quell the unrest. This move galvanized the PDPA into launching a desperate coup d'etat. Tanks and armored vehicles rumbled through the streets of Kabul. The presidential palace was quickly surrounded, signaling the start of a bloody struggle. Trapped within the besieged presidential palace, Daud Khan refused to surrender. He was a proud and stubborn man, accustomed to wielding absolute power. He had stared down challenges before, and he was determined to weather this storm as well. However, this time, the odds were stacked against him. The loyalty of the Afghan army, the bedrock of his regime, was crumbling. Many officers and soldiers, influenced by PDPA propaganda or simply disillusioned with Daud's rule, had cast their lot with the revolutionaries. As the day wore on, the situation inside the palace grew increasingly desperate. The defenders, outnumbered and outgunned, fought bravely, but were no match for the superior firepower of the insurgents. The palace walls shook under the relentless bombardment, and the air grew thick with smoke and the stench of cordite. Daud, holed up in the palace's command center, refused to believe that his grip on power was slipping away. He issued defiant pronouncements, urging his loyalists to fight on, but his words rang hollow in the face of the overwhelming assault. As the sun began to set on Kabul, casting long shadows across the embattled city, the siege of the presidential palace reached its bloody climax. A group of PDPA fighters, led by a young officer named Mohammed Aslam Watanjar, managed to breach the palace defenses and fight their way to Daud Khan's command center. The defenders, exhausted and demoralized, put up a token resistance before being cut down. Daud Khan, along with his family and loyal retainers, met his end in a hail of gunfire. The once mighty president of Afghanistan lay dead on the blood-soaked marble floor, his dreams of a modern and prosperous nation shattered by the bullets of his enemies. The coup d'etat, launched just 24 hours earlier, had reached its brutal conclusion. A new chapter in Afghanistan's turbulent history was about to begin, one that would be written in blood and marked by decades of conflict and suffering. The dust settles, and a new regime emerges in Kabul. With Daud Khan dead and the presidential palace secured, the PDPA moved swiftly to consolidate its grip on power. Nur Muhammad Taraki, the leader of the Khalq faction, was declared the new president of Afghanistan. Babrak Karmal, the head of the Parcham faction, was appointed deputy prime minister. A move that masked the deep divisions that still existed within the PDPA. The new government, eager to legitimize its rule and win over the Afghan people, proclaimed the April Revolution a victory for the working class and promised a new era of peace, progress, and social justice. However, the regime's brutality in seizing power, particularly the summary execution of Daud Khan and his family, sent shockwaves through Afghan society. The coup, initially hailed by some as a long overdue revolution, was now viewed with suspicion and fear by many. The immediate aftermath of the coup was a time of great uncertainty and upheaval in Afghanistan. The PDPA, despite its promises of unity and progress, was riven by internal power struggles. The Khalq and Parcham factions, uneasy allies in the coup, soon turned on each other, vying for control of the government and the military. This internal strife would have disastrous consequences for Afghanistan, paving the way for further bloodshed and instability. The PDPA's radical social and economic reforms, implemented with revolutionary zeal, alienated large segments of the Afghan population. The regime's attempts to impose land reform, abolish traditional customs, and promote secularism were met with fierce resistance, particularly in the conservative countryside. The Afghan people, deeply religious and steeped in tradition, saw the PDPA's reforms as an assault on their way of life. The 1978 coup d'etat was a watershed moment in Afghan history. It marked the end of the monarchy, the rise of communism, and the beginning of a long and bloody chapter of conflict and instability. The coup unleashed forces that would tear Afghanistan apart, setting in motion a chain of events that would have profound consequences not only for the country itself but for the region and the world. The coup created a power vacuum in Afghanistan, a vacuum that would soon be filled by external actors. The Soviet Union, seeing an opportunity to expand its influence in the region, would become increasingly embroiled in Afghan affairs, eventually sending its own troops into the country in 1979. The United States, determined to counter Soviet expansionism, would provide support to the Afghan resistance, fueling a proxy war that would drag on for a decade. The Soviet Union, initially hesitant to intervene directly in Afghanistan, found itself drawn deeper and deeper into the Afghan quagmire. The PDPA regime, racked by internal divisions and facing growing armed resistance, proved incapable of governing the country or containing the insurgency. In December 1979, fearing the collapse of its client state and the loss of its strategic investment in Afghanistan, the Soviet Union launched a full-scale invasion. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan marked the beginning of a brutal 9-year war that would claim the lives of hundreds of thousands of Afghans and over 14,000 Soviet soldiers. The war would have a devastating impact on Afghanistan, destroying its infrastructure, shattering its economy, and displacing millions of its people. The war would also have profound geopolitical consequences, exacerbating Cold War tensions and contributing to the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union itself. The 1978 coup d'etat cast a long shadow over Afghanistan, its legacy one of conflict, instability, and human suffering. The coup unleashed forces that would transform the country from a relatively peaceful, albeit impoverished nation, into a battleground for Cold War rivalries, a breeding ground for extremism, and a byword for failed states. The coup's most enduring legacy is the cycle of violence and instability that continues to plague Afghanistan to this day. The country has not known a single day of peace since 1978. The war against the Soviet Union was followed by a brutal civil war, the rise of the Taliban, the US-led invasion in 2001, and the ongoing insurgency that continues to claim lives and undermine efforts at reconstruction and reconciliation. The coup also had a devastating impact on Afghan society. Millions of Afghans were killed, wounded, or displaced by the decades of conflict. The country's education system was decimated, its healthcare system collapsed, and its economy shattered. The war also led to a proliferation of weapons and the empowerment of warlords, further undermining the rule of law and hindering efforts at state building. If you found this video informative, please like and subscribe for more content on historical events like this. Thank you for watching.